What's something that you've learned about yourself recently?
Oh, today?
Today, yesterday, last month,
I
last
learned
week? We're
something
catching up
today.
today.
I learned something today. It's a pretty vulnerable thing, but what I've known for a long time, because we know a lot in our heads, but what I've known is that when we're triggered by something, it's always because there's a shadow part of ourselves that we've had hiding behind the scenes. And isn't that so behind the shade? I didn't even think of that. That just
I
came
love
out.
it. I love it. She's
Um,
so she's so witty, everyone. I love it.
but yeah, so what it really means is if we're triggered, that's a part of us that we're seeing out there in someone else or something else. So it's a part of an unresolved part of us, and it's a part of us we don't like to see that we've been keeping behind the shade. And and I noticed, and I really hope my daughter doesn't mind me sharing this, but what I've noticed is that I have passed on some traits to my daughter, and I've had a big realization this morning. So I went to her house yesterday and I looked, and I was there with her grandchildren. And I was just being observing them and how they were functioning, and I was seeing their beautiful home, and I was seeing how she runs her beautiful home, and I also realized that she's got a strategy that I have had my whole life, and that is that you hide your mess behind the cupboards, or you hide your mess behind a door, a room, and that's the messy room, or that's the so we still create the mess, but we hide it. And I she said, and she often says to me, "Oh, don't look in the something room, or don't look in the so and so room, or don't go in there," because she's got some shame around it. But I've always, and I've recognized that in her. But now I've really recognized, well, that's what I do. That's what I do. And one of my big realizations today was Oh, when you've got clutter, because I wrote this in a chapter that I wrote, a chapter in a book I wrote last year. When we have a lot of clutter around us, it's actually the sign of a cluttered mind. And chaos there is chaos that we've created is because we've got chaos going on in here. And it really helped me realize all those times when because I'm just going to say, she's the most beautiful, attractive, together looking being person. She presents as so together and just wow. And I'm not saying that I do that as well as her, but I can present that way. But behind the scenes, there's clutter and a bit of chaos. And I've lived a lot of my life with things going on behind the shades that other people haven't been seeing. And they've been looking at me, and that really supports exactly what I wanted to share with you today about how we mask. We learn to mask, and we learn to show the world who we want the world to see. And we hide this part of ourselves that we don't want them to see. And one of the biggest keys to know that we've got some work to do on ourselves is when we're triggered. And I've got three children, but my oldest one is the one that has led me to doing what I do. She's led me to that because I knew I was struggling to parent her and to meet her needs and give her what she needed. And and I can see she's still triggering me a bit. And then I thought, oh, more work to do. I've got some more work to do because I looked at her and I thought, oh, she's doing that. So am I. I'm still doing that to a degree, not anything like I used to, but still to a degree. So I'm still doing it. So that means to me, I've got some freaking work to do here to help myself function better. Because when we're masking, we're not functioning in what I describe as our thriving state. When we've got things that we uh, are dysfunctional and chaotic, that's survival state. That's when we're in our survival state. That's when our survival brain is on. That's when we're in our what I describe as our fear thinking operational program instead of our clear thinking operational program. Does that make sense?
It does because it's a difference between thriving and surviving,
Oh, yeah.
right? You have some people that will say that, you know what, my life is good. And when they break down their life, they're literally only surviving, living paycheck to
Yep.
paycheck.
Yep.
They're one bad day from ending it all.
Yeah.
But because they're so used to that, they're looking at it as, you know what? Life is good. I'm here. I'm existing. Okay, fine, you exist. But are you
Battling
growing?
through.
You're battling
Battling
through,
through, I
right?
hear. We hear that a
Yeah.
lot here in Australia. Oh, battling through, getting through. Oh yeah, just getting by. Just this. It's survival mode.
Yeah. And I wonder at what point did the person start to accept that as their life, right? Like when you look at kids, like because you mentioned kids, and when you look at kids, they're running around and having the time of their life. Carefree. I remember one time I was driving someone to the hospital and these two children are running and they're having time, they're laughing, they're hitting each other, pushing each other like kids do, and one child fell to the ground and then all the adults are like, "Oh my God, what just happened?" Right? The
Uh-huh.
kids looked at each other, they started laughing, they got back up and started running again, right?
No.
Carefree. And I think we kind of lose that in a way because we just get so caught up in, I don't have time to feel happy when I'm knocked down because, oh my God, the bills. And when I knock down, woe is me. But one thing you mentioned that I want to touch on is that when you mention masks, I think a lot of people have that. And that's one of the reasons why I came up with the name Behind the Shades. Like, what is behind the shades of the person?
Yeah.
And I think people go out in public presenting an image that they want people to see them as. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's the image that they have at home. That's the second
Mm-hmm.
mask. And then there's that mask that is hidden away that I don't want anyone to see that. It could be that, you know what? I have some insecurities. I have some
Mm-hmm.
trauma. I have some neglect. I have some doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I have some lack of confidence.
Mm.
So when you mention it, how devastating can it be to someone to realize that, oh my God, if someone were to find out that I'm actually pretending all this time, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
Well, the way I see it is it's almost a realization of, well, who am I if I'm not that masked self version of myself? Who am I? Oh my God, I'm that person with all those issues. So we just, most of the time, well, what it does is we either crank it up and we work harder to mask it, or, and when there's shame around it, or we have a realization and we think, hang on a minute, I need to work on me because this isn't the real me. I don't want to be fake anymore. I don't want to mask myself anymore. I don't want to be that person pretending anymore. I want to rediscover who I really am, and I want to be my best self, show up as the best version of myself and start living that child spirit again. See, I've told my grandchildren, it's so funny. They have all these toys and things, cute little things, and I go, oh my God, I want a squishy toy. Or, oh my God, I want one of those. And I say this to them, and I say, you know what I really want? I told my one of my granddaughters, she's 11 now, and I told her this a few years ago. I said, you know what I really want? I just want to be a kid again. And she goes, "Ah, do you want to be a kid again, Nana?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "And hey," I said, "for my birthday, can you just tell your mum all I want is one of those," because she had those poppet fidget things. And I said, "One of those and one of those squishy things. And I want that. And I just want some kid stuff." I said, "Can you do that? Can you tell her that?" And I said, "Let's just be kids. Let's just muck about like kids." And she's told her mum about 10 times, "Nana just wants to be a kid again. So can she come over and play on the tramp? Or can she come over and do this?" And it's so cool because I shut down so much of my child's self trying to be sensible and trying to I didn't have to lose being responsible. You can have fun and be responsible. It's
Why do you
just if
think so many of us give up that innocence, that playful nature, childlike behavior as we get older?
Well, we're told, well, that's not on. You can't do that. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And we're shaped by our environment around us that tells us, no, you need to wear that. You need to speak like this. You need to. And so we start conforming and molding ourselves according to what others have told us who we need to be, which is, can I share a model with you? So this is what I have created. So these are the external influences that develop our self-concept or our identity. Can you see that? Yeah. So we this is who we come into the world pure, complete, innocent, like you said, free-spirited, trusting. We've got no reason not to trust. No one's given us a reason not to trust, or things to worry about, or things to limit, reasons to limit ourselves, limiting beliefs, limit ourselves. But then we we are surrounded by family members, friends, our culture, and that's huge. Like that could be anything from religion to social media to school to anything. Your nationality, it can be anything. And then we've got events that have happened to us in our lives. And then we form a belief system based on what people have told us, and then we've decided, oh, I better do that. Oh, that's true. Oh, this is true. And we make all these decisions about life, about who we need to be and who we need to show up as, according to what all of this has told us. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love that because I'm looking at the Friends one, and I think that one, in a lot of ways, maybe even more so these days, has more of an impact on the family as you put it there. And I would say that is probably neck and neck, if not higher than culture, because sometimes we put ourselves in situations where our friends would isolate us away from the two other things that you mentioned, right? One could be family, one could be culture. I look at, let's say, friends who are always in some type of drama or who are toxic,
Yeah.
right? It's a one person mentioned that some people are so deep in the toxicity of their friends that it's like cult like. You can't
Yeah.
leave us. Stay with us. If you
Mm-hmm.
try to be something else, you're like shamed. You're like
Mm-hmm.
made fun of. Like one example that I shared with that person was when you unite through a dislike or hatred of something, you can get as many people as possible as quickly as possible, but it's temporary because once you stop hating that thing, you're no longer united. Versus
Yeah.
like love, right? Love will connect you for 10, 20, 30 years, which is why when you have a very healthy and loving marriage, it can last forever.
Yeah.
So in that example, we're sharing that when you have friends who influence you negatively, and because let's say you're united in a dislike of something, when you start to heal yourself, as you mentioned, when you start to fix yourself, now you're not a part of them anymore because what united you is no longer a part of your life,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Because we spend, I mean, the changing of our self-concept to fit in with all of this is the creation of a false identity. And and when we begin to realize that that's not who I really am, and maybe these people I'm going to question what they've taught me and what they've told me to believe. When we begin to question that, then we have more power to choose who we want to have in our circle, who we want to have in our ecosystem. Does that make
How,
sense? Because
yeah,
otherwise,
how can we start
we're just,
questioning that?
yeah, well, cool. So I guess we start questioning that. I guess we've got to have a realization that the way we're functioning is not who we want to be.
Oh, Sue, that can be tough. Some people don't realize that until many years while they're in it.
Yeah, I agree. But then some people don't want to change. So we, some people aren't open to change because here's the thing, the survival operating system, its biggest threat is change. So our amygdala and our survival brain, it doesn't, it would love to just wrap you and I in bubble tape, bubble wrap, and just stick us in a corner and never move. Because otherwise because that keeps the amygdala in control and it also keeps us safe from danger. But the reality of it is we don't get to grow, we don't get to enjoy life. We're completely contracted and we have an awful, miserable life. But the amygdala's job isn't to keep us happy, it's to keep us safe from danger. So it thinks change is too risky because there could be an unknown out there and something could happen. Something wrong could happen. So don't change. Don't change who you are. Let's just keep everything the same and then it all feels safe. So that's how the very primal, primitive amygdala functions. So it's threatened by change. So the minute we think, oh, I need to change that, the amygdala, if you want to know why we never change our habits, even though we've got habits that we don't like, because the amygdala comes in and it goes, don't you dare change. You must stay the familiar way because then I'm in charge and I'm keeping you safe from danger. Because if you change, that's too risky. That's what the amygdala thinks. It doesn't have any ability to know what's good for you. It's like the smoke alarm that's just a thing, an object, and all it can do is alarm if there's burnt toast or a house fire. The smoke alarm can't make you happy and can't differentiate between the burnt toast or a house fire. It has no ability to differentiate. That's up to us now. That's when we put on our switch on our smart brain and we go, hang on, is the house on fire or has my husband or daughter burnt the toast? Which is it? And that's when we switch on our smart brain. But it's so most people don't even know that. They don't even know that changing is a threat to their survival operating system. And that's why they don't want to change. They don't feel like they want to change, but intellectually, they might want to change. But their bodies, the amygdala is just pumping adrenaline, making you feel like you're in fear, in survival mode. It's going to pump out all the hormones to make you feel that intensely, so resistant to changing that you'll come up with every excuse under the world not to change. And you'll justify all of this away. We become so that masked self of ours or that created self justifies our way around not changing.
So
So then,
let me ask you a question then, Sue, because you mentioned something very good. If we want the change on a intellectual level and something is preventing us from changing, then why do we ask others to change when we know deep down is something that we will struggle with?
well, that's it. So we're wanting others to change. Well, there can be two reasons why. I mean, one of them is because they're triggering us and exposing things in us that we wish either we had done or that we could change in ourselves. And then the other one is sometimes when you've done the work, you can see what's going on now because you've experienced it yourself and you've come out the other end. and you just want to help that person because you can see why they're stuck. But so that from our point of view, I suppose, if you're well in this journey, you can see it in them, can't you? And you just want them to wake up and realize what can happen, how their life can be so much better, but they can't see it. So I guess our job there, and still learning this, is to help people see a new perspective so that they can get out of their survival brain functioning. Because when we're in fear, we do have foggy vision. We are looking at life from a survival point of view, and we can't think clearly. I call it fear thinking and clear thinking because we actually can't think clearly and rationally. So we just make survival-based decisions and we block what, even though intellectually ideally we want something, we don't have the programming to get us there. We're still in survival programming. And unless someone can help people understand that as long as you're stuck in survival programming, you actually don't have the ability to change. Because when it's actually in it, when it's running, like we go in and out of it, and we want to get someone, in and out of it for a moment when they're thinking clearly, and then it's like, oh, that's when they can have the realization when we've switched on what I describe as their smart brain and their thriving brain, their smart brain. But the key to getting someone out of survival mode is not to try to logic and intellectualize and try to prove to them that this works and all that sort of stuff. The antidote to fear is love. And unless we make a loving emotional connection with them, and unless they can get out of their head and into their heart, and we help them do that, they can't switch on their smart brain. Does that make sense?
It does, and it sounds like such a sad state to be in,
Yeah.
where every thought, every action is purely out of survival,
Mm-hmm.
whereas other people who are healed, every thought, every action is out of love.
Well, mhm,
It reminds me of a situation where this was actually very recent since we're talking about recent events. And I shared with one of my friends who was becoming very controlling to other
mhm,
people.
mhm,
And some people stopped being his friend. And I mentioned to him, this was probably 2 months ago, that you're demanding a lot from your friends because you're telling them that every time you call, and he would call, let's say, up to 10 times a day, that we have to answer your call. I'm like, what you have to understand is that everyone has their own life and many people have their own families. So you may be childless and partnerless, right? And you may have the time to call people 10 times a day, but most of us work during the day and most of us have time with our family afterwards, right? So we don't have the time to answer all these calls and speak for 2, 3 hours on the phone. And I
mhm,
tried to explain that to him and it set him off. F
mhm,
bombs and everything.
mhm,
So I let it be, and the friendship ultimately was ruined because of it. So we had a conversation about a couple days ago, a week ago, and it came up. And I told him that part of the reason why people get turned off by you is because whenever you speak to someone, you're always complaining about something. I'm like, you're coming not from a place of love, you're coming from a place of
fear.
that, of fear, right? And then what he shared was that he said that, well, my friends should always listen to all of my complaints. And then I asked him, I was like, that's pretty arrogant and selfish of you that you think that everyone should answer your calls whenever you call to hear you complain about something that you have the power to complain about or to change. And I share this with you, Sue, because it made me think about what you said when people are coming from a place of fear. Because there's people that I think many people, if not most people, know what they have to change, but they choose not to change
Hmm.
because if they were to change, the world would view them in a different way.
That's the fear of change. That so we actually are afraid to change, which is why I went through, and it still comes up from time to time, have been through a fear of success.
How so?
Well, if I'm really successful, how can I be the shy, quiet, um, uh, insecure person I've always been? I'll
Ooh,
be
so it sounds
different.
like you maybe were grieving the possibility of losing the old you.
Absolutely. I think absolutely. I think also just couldn't even imagine myself as being successful because that always happened. This is my version of my old self. That always happened to people over there. That wasn't me. That was how other people do things, but that's not me. How can I had never seen myself as a highly successful person. And so I couldn't even imagine myself as being that. So I was rejecting that vision for myself.
My thing with success, and I experienced this and I've seen it. I used to see it from a distance until then I experienced, I was like, this is exactly how that feels like. I knew that if I were to get successful, the people around me, I'm going to outgrow them.
Hmm.
And there's some people that I know who would turn down success because they didn't want that to happen.
Yep, yep, absolutely. And also, what do we mean by success? So I've changed my meaning of success, and I think a lot of this is dependent on what stage you're in your life and what how your life has been panning out, what events have happened, what circumstances. And I think for me, my version of success when I was a kid, there was so much pressure to be hardworking and academic. I had to be academic and hardworking. And if you don't work hard enough, you're lazy, good for nothing. And if don't get great results, you amount to nothing. So and that I was raised that way. And they were my belief that I had strong beliefs that I was just disappointing my parents over and over because I wasn't meeting the grade. So, but then I was a bit of a conundrum because I was actually a bright kid and I ended up like grade six, getting the top of the school in grade six in primary school. And then that came back to bite me because then my parents put all this pressure on me to be the smart one in the family. And then they sent me to this school, took out a loan, a private school, and they pinned all these hopes on me, and I never wanted to go to the school. I didn't like it. They weren't people like me. They were rich kids. We were very poor. And I knew I wouldn't fit in. There were some people I already knew that went there that I didn't like. And I was highly resistant. But my father and mum, both of them, oh no, the academic achievement is what matters here, not you and what you want, or not you fitting in, or being in the right environment for you. So I ended up going there. And what happened? 5 years of complete shutdown and anxiety because it wasn't, I didn't fit in to that environment. And I had to pretend I was someone else. I had to fit in that environment. I actually had to pretend I was somebody else in a way. I mean, I didn't have to, but I did. That's what I chose to do because I felt like, how else am I going to function in this environment? But I never asked anyone, a friend over, because my friends were all wealthy and we were poor. We were very poor. And I had shame around that and embarrassment around that. Their parents were very wealthy and professional. So there was this massive conflict inside me, and I created a false identity of myself and all this shame around myself in the background. Does that make sense?
Yes, because a lot of people do that. A lot of people craft their identity that they want to present to the world. And
Yeah.
I've seen so many people get lost in that identity that they don't even remember who they were before it.
Absolutely. And back then, my, I felt like I was my parents' biggest disappointment because by 5 years into that school, I was begging them to let me leave, and I was deliberately failing. I failed physics. My father was a physics teacher, and I failed physics to get back at him and to get my way and go to a school where I wanted to go to and just be who I wanted to be. He was picking all these subjects for me, maths and science and all the maths and sciences, and I didn't want to do any of them. So I didn't want to be controlled by that. So to me, I was rejecting that kind of success. I was I was being very defiant. So I developed this. I don't want to be successful. I don't want to. I don't want, I was rebellious. And I had a resistance to success because in my head, success was being an academic achiever. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to please my parents anymore. I was rebelling. And then what happened was they ended up giving in, and I chose a school and I did better in 1 year than I'd done in 6 years. And because I was in the right environment for myself. We were a values match. And one of the biggest things for me is that, if I was in alignment, when we're in misalignment, our nervous system is distressed. We're distressed. And when we're not in alignment, and that's why, if we want something over there, but we don't know how to get there and it's not happening, we're in misalignment. There's something wrong. But that's because we've got this program running that we don't know how to change. And we don't even know that we're in that program. We just think life sucks because we can't have that thing over there, or we can't have that job or that car or that house or that family or whatever it is that we're wanting. But when I describe life as an inside out job, we're not looking in. We haven't figured out that it's an inside out job. We haven't figured out that it's here that needs to change the operating system, what's going on up here and in here, that when we change that, the whole game changes. And as we start to move through stages in our life and we have these realizations, our values completely change. We start changing what matters. Our perspective on success. My version of success now is love, joy, and fulfillment. I reckon that would be my version of success. Am I being loving? Am I experiencing love every day? Am I experiencing joy? And am I experiencing fulfillment? Well, if I can tick those boxes, yeah. Oh, and I would say deep connection, that for me, but that kind of comes under love. But if I'm ticking those boxes, then I think I'm living an incredibly successful life.
I measure success by the character traits as well now,
Hmm.
because it's something that is more, to me, more defining of that person, right? Like when I look at someone who has a house and a car, I look at it as you've done well to achieve these things. But one,
Mm.
I don't know how you achieved it. Was it an inheritance? Did someone buy it for you? Did you win the lottery? Or did you work hard to get it? Fine, right? There's so many ways. But when someone is kind, when someone
Mm.
is caring, when someone is understanding, I know the only way to achieve those things is that they did the work to do so.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I attribute more value to it. And that's why it's success to me, the greatest form of success, because you can take that type of success anywhere and it has value to
Oh,
whomever.
I
Right.
agree. And I describe it as who someone is being is my measure of success. Not what they're doing and not what they have, but who they're being. To me, are you a human being or are you a human doing? Are you, and are you out? Is it what you have? And are we measuring, is it out here or is it in here? To me, it's who you're being and how I feel in your presence. That to me, I trust my inner compass now. I trust that. And if someone is triggering me or something is triggering me, I now just look at it and I think, I mean, I say just look at it. It's not always easy, but I will now look at it and I'll think, okay, Sue, it's not about them, it's about you. Who am I being? This is an opportunity for me to level up. I'm not liking what they're doing, but there must be a part of me that needs to level up too now. Again, there's another thing for me to work on me. And when well, I'm sure you know, when you're around people that are impacting you positively and your self-concept is strong and your identity is strong and you feel great about yourself, um, that's when I know that I'm being who I want to be and I'm around people who are like me, who lift me up, not
What are
drag me
maybe
down.
preventing us from surrounding ourselves with people that are going to benefit us in a healthy way while trying to shed those who are around us in a toxic way then?
What was the question? What,
Yeah, so
how
how
would you
would
do that?
someone, yeah, like because you mentioned your the model,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think it's fantastic, especially the friends and the family part, because the events
Mm-hmm.
usually come
Mm-hmm.
throughout your life. How can someone then begin to surround themselves with more positive and healthy influences versus the not
Oh,
so healthy ones that they currently have?
yeah. Yeah. I love that question, and I'm going to build on that question if that's okay, because many people are kind of stuck in that. Like your family is your family. And sometimes you're actually living in the same house as them. And it could be a partner, or it could be your kids, or it could be your parents or something. So sometimes that is hard to escape. You actually can physically struggle to be away from them. So there's that part of it too. Sometimes it isn't easy to just, I'm not going to be around these people. Well, they may still matter to you. So what I've started to do is I I believe acceptance is really important and forgiveness. So for me, if I'm around someone and I can see that they're really struggling, and I now describe it as this person is struggling right now. This isn't about me. So if they're angry or they're being dysfunctional and they're complaining and all that stuff, they're stuck. So again, I open up my heart and I think, oh, I can see what's going on here. They're stuck. I I'm not going to fight that because they need love. They need love and acceptance for who they are. Because deep down, I've got this other model, deep down, we've all got this beautiful true self that is being covered up by our fear programming. This is our fear self. And then we have our false self, which is our masking self. But the thing is, we're doing this false self, but we've got this running all the time anyway. We've got this program running. If we're doing our false self, then we've got this running underneath, basically. And sometimes we just see the raw fear self. And that's when they're complaining and they're acting out, they're being disruptive or dysfunctional, obviously, overtly dysfunctional. This is covert dysfunction. This is overt dysfunction, but they're both the survival program running. Makes sense? So if I've got family members or friends around me and I know that's just switched on their survival brain and they're complaining or whinging or something, I have a few strategies. One is I make a decision. Okay, do I want to just tune out or do I want to? Well, because I've taught kids how to have this invisible bubble around you that's really strong. You know, when you press a balloon, sometimes it doesn't pop. Well, this bubble's super strong, super powerful, and no one can burst your bubble. So you have this invisible bubble around you if somebody is being really awful around you to protect yourself in a really nurturing, loving way so that you don't get dragged into that. Does that make sense? So sometimes I have my imaginary bubble and I don't want that person to burst my bubble. So I go into a place of, I'm just not even going to let this spoil my little happy world, my happy self. And I'm going to be very strong and I'm going to put up my shield, my bubble, and not even buy into that. Then there's other times when it's that's easier said than done, and you can't necessarily do that. And that in those circumstances, I have really learned, and I'm still learning to open up my heart. And well, firstly, I observe them. I observe them and I put myself into a position of an observer and I create space between myself and that person or the energy because I don't want to be in the energy and dive into the problem pond, I call it. So I don't want to dive in there and be part of it and swimming around and whirlpooling around in that problem pond, getting all that negative energy. So I look at it now and I come from an observer place and I put space between myself. And then I think, oh, hurt people hurt people. We know that. Hurt people hurt people. And pain is, all of that is projected pain. Their behavior is pain being projected because they've got pain on the inside. This is simply projected pain. So I think about it and now I look at them and I think, wow, they're in a lot of pain. This is really hard for them. So I'm opening up my heart. How would you treat someone who'd just broken their leg or something? You'd run to you'd want to help them and you'd want to do whatever you can for them. So it's opening up my heart. And I think, wow, how can I help this person right now? How can I be who they need me to be? So my question there is, I might listen. It just depends on what the situation is, but who do I need to be right now? Now, if it's a repeated behavior and the person's never listened before and I've tried it before, I've tried something before and it hasn't worked, then, I might just put my bubble up. If it's an opportunity and I think, this could be a moment where I actually really deeply connect with this person and I help them get out of their survival brain, I open up my heart, and we actually have a loving connection here, a deep connection. And then they're going to be able to listen to my logic. Because if we attempt to logic with someone in that state, it just, it doesn't work. So we can make all these insightful points and, try to get across to them, but we're just going to trigger them more because they're still in their survival. They haven't gone through that loving connection to open up their smart brain, their clear thinking brain. They've missed that. So the loving connection is the bridge between it. And we must do that. It does not work to just try to logic someone out of survival, which is why we can't logic ourselves out of our survival programming until we begin to love ourselves again. The key here is about learning to love yourself. And when we're in survival, we are not in self-love. And we can convince ourselves and think that because we get our nails done and our hair done and have a bubble bath, that this is self-love. It isn't. Self-love is actually loving yourself all through the day, all the time. It doesn't end. It's not, I'll love myself now, but I won't love myself later. It's that's not self-love. That's not at all. And there's so many people that actually think that's what it is. So until we learn to fall back in love with ourselves, we're going to stay in survival programming. Or until we learn how to open up our heart, we're going to stay stuck. Now, there are plenty of people that come in and out. You're either in one or the other. You can't be in them both at the same time. It's like being on a station where you're on the platform and there's the train. You can't have your foot on the platform and on the train, the moving train. It's not possible. That's what this is like. So we've got to stop kidding ourselves and thinking that we can do both. So we need to understand that we do need to activate our heart space, get into our heart space, and begin to learn how to love ourselves again. And then we can change that operating system. And some people are doing it on and off because that's like the evolving stage. There's surviving, then there's evolving, and then there's thriving. So that's like you're in the evolving stage. I sometimes call it the striving stage. So you're trying really hard, you're doing all this personal development stuff, and you're learning a lot, and you're trying really, really hard, and you're striving and you're striving and you're striving. But the reality of it is you've still got that fear program going underneath. And you've almost got fearful of not changing now, and you want to change yourself. And you're fearful of, oh, it's not working, because you still haven't learned how to stop and actually love yourself. Because you still think that all the things you're doing are going to change you, but you haven't changed who you're being, which is a self-loving human being. And then when you learn that, you can be loving for others.
My concern, so for those people, is that I think eventually, like in some example that I gave and some example that you gave, that people who are coming from a loving place are not going to wait forever for these people to come out of their fear-based
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Yeah.
And the more that people leave them, the more that they may say, you know what? I'm alone. So why should I change? Maybe their incentive of changing has decreased. Have you seen that as well?
Mm. Yes, I definitely have. And there's someone I can think of, and she was worried about splitting with her husband because she felt like he wasn't growing with her. And she felt like she was outgrowing him and he wasn't on the same journey. So they were becoming further and further apart. And she was very fearful that that relationship might break down. Um, and she was worried that she would be alone now and have lost her beautiful husband that she loved, but he just wasn't on the same journey. So uh, that really happened with me a little bit. There was a moment where my hubby said, I feel inadequate. I don't feel like I can keep up with you anymore. He did say that to me. And it was a really, really big moment. And then I thought, okay, I need to open up my heart and accept him for who he is and where he's at. Because trying to get him to change wasn't working. Trying to get him on board wasn't working. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to be loving me. I'm just going to be the loving person I am for him. And you know what? I had a massive shift. He had a massive shift. Our relationship had a massive shift. It was like the tension was gone. I completely accepted him for who he was. I accepted that life is full of stages in everything. Like I didn't know anything about marketing or anything about running a business when I started to run a business. So I went back to the infancy stage. I was an infant and I needed people to treat me like an infant in that area. I was very sophisticated in other areas of my life, but I was back in the infancy stage in new things I was learning. So I then needed, I looked at him and I thought, oh, he's in the beginning. He's in the beginning stage. Why am I expecting him to be up here? When somebody doesn't know something or they're at the beginning stages, they simply need love and guidance, and that'll help them move through the stages faster. And for me, being a teacher and I was in educational leadership, I understand that concept. The kids who learned fastest were the kids who were supported most and valued most. And they were the ones. Kids can learn so fast, it's not funny when they've got a connection, a mentor that they trust and they connect with. They learn so friggin' fast. They don't need 6 years. They don't need this. They don't need that. They don't have to go through this structured curriculum. They learn so fast when they've got somebody who's a great guide or mentor for them. So, what I started to become was this loving, trusted person for my husband and this other friend of mine. She did this too because I recommended. I said to her, "This is what I would do, and this happened with me and my hubby." And I explained to her what happened, and she did it too. And she thought, "Oh, I've been expecting him to be where I'm at. I've been expecting this. And I've been getting shitty about because he's not." But then hey, he's great at some things that I'm terrible at, and I'm great at some things that he's terrible at. So if we can appreciate each other's strengths and value that, and not focus on what's missing and what they're doing badly, but focus on, well, hang on, what actually attracted me to you in the first place? There must be something. Now, there are some people, I get it, that we do want to just cut and we realize, oh God, that was the old me. I used to hang out with people like that and they don't help me. I think we do need to come to that realization. And then there's other people who we actually really love, but we're frustrated the hell out of because they're not functioning at the level that we want them to be functioning at. And that's where those tricky ones, that's where my experience is open your heart. And that's happened with me in so many of my beautiful relationships that I have now with people who are close to me. The key was that I needed to be the better person and I needed to open my heart and accept where they were because their growth was fast when they had my support and my guidance and trust. And I wasn't pushy. I just allowed them. You allow them to grow organically. And because they're trusting you and they're loving you, it's part of, I describe it, and because I work with parents a lot, it's part of being inspirational. Show them, demonstrate it, be who you need to be, show up as you need to be, and be loving. Don't tell them to be loving for them. That's the key. Instead of, telling them, oh, stop complaining or stop blaming this or something, stop doing it yourself and even pull yourself up in front of them and go, actually, I was just complaining then and I don't like that about myself. Help me if you can. Um, Point out, next time I'm complaining, can you point out to me? Because I don't like that. That doesn't help me. And I want them to see me working on me. And so I'm the subject, not them, because that's threatening for them if they're the subject. Does that make sense?
It does, because We have to see it sometimes through both lenses, but at the same time, we still need to protect ourselves because it can be exhausting trying to help someone who at
Mm.
that point in time may not want to be helped, or and a lot of times they don't care to be helped. So as you're pouring and pouring into this person, sometimes you're neglecting your children, your
Oh,
husband, your wife. So, Sue, as we close, what
mm.
advice can you give to those who are on the outside who want to make sure that they protect their peace, their energy, and time when it comes to having people who are stuck in the fear mind and don't want to leave anytime soon?
Um, I think I would be, I think I would be saying, well, we can't save everybody. And what is my role here? Like, I've come right back to pulling myself right back to, well, what's my role here on this planet, on this earth? What's my purpose? What am I here for? And I come back to that and I think, okay, well, it's to be the number one is to be the best version of myself. And then number two is help others and make a difference for others who want to be helped. Make a difference for those who want it. Because as you said, we don't, and again, there's another part of this, and that is decide where do I want to spend or how do I want to spend my time, energy, money, all my resources, where, how and when do I want to spend them? Do I want to spend it on trying to change someone who doesn't want to change? Or do I want to spend it on someone who wants to change and is going to grow and get great results, and we're both going to be lifted up? Because it's an unfair exchange of energy if we're doing all the heavy lifting. That's not self-love, and that's not loving for the other person because it's not helping them. It's actually not helping them.